The lyric about asking the mother to pray for one, that is one of the connections I made with the song Hobo, because then of course there's the plea for a prayer. Pray for a hobo who's gone wrong. But it's not only that. So in the song Hobo there's family relations as well. And I was intrigued to it begins with a lyric focusing on a book I always started but I've never read. And this is a book that one hopes to pass on to one's son. And shortly after that, there's a reference to being born to follow the steps of my dad.
Right.
Could you talk about the way in which the family is present in the song Hobo?
Sure. That's probably the most kind of uncomfortably autobiographical song I've ever written.
Yes.
Because my relationship with my dad is very much unfinished. By the time I was born, he was already 44, 45. He died at 72. I don't know how it is for anybody else, but in my life, I spent a lot of time in my teen years not paying much attention to the adults around me. Paying a lot of attention to playing the guitar and listening to music, riding my bike later on.
Stump jumpers.
Yeah, right. Driving around in my car, doing things like that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I kind of came out of that and reacquainted myself with my dad and found that we had really, really tight bonds. We had a lot in common that, of course, as a teenager, I couldn't see for whatever reason. And then we got into this relationship, and he was taken away. So we didn't get to finish our relationship, really,
Yes.
And that weighs heavily when, my son is now 16, and I think about that a lot, because I see a lot of commonality between him and me and him and my dad. And it seems like it is kind of a manuscript that's bound to be unfinished, and that's troublesome.
When I asked you at the end of our previous interview about your philosophy, you quoted your father having highlighted not to worry about what other people think, and how core that had become to your own value system. And then speaking of philosophy more broadly, we talked a bit about Wittgenstein, a favourite of yours. We talked about Harlan Hubbard, because your friend Jimmy had just alerted you to the existence of Pain Hollow, with an awareness of how significant those particular books have been for you, Pain Hollow and Wittgenstein's Tractatus. I just wondered what this book is in Hobo that you want to pass on to your son, or is it the kind of a metaphorical book? Because you used the metaphor of a manuscript being written just a moment ago.
Yeah, it definitely feels more metaphorical.
Yeah.
There's definitely a feeling of trying to communicate a big picture of what my experiences have been. And I'm not a super adept communicator, so that's hard for me. It was hard for my dad. My dad, didn't talk a lot. When he did talk, he had some pretty profound things to say often, but he didn't, he wasn't one who was going to sit you down and say, now I'm going to tell you. We're going to get down to what's really going on right now. That never happened. And it seems like that's the case in my experience with my son, where, as much as I would love to be able to just sit down and say, this is what I'm talking about, but that's not ever happened.
I want my son to have this when I'm dead. It's a book I always start, but I'd never read.
There's been little bits and pieces and chunks, you have to wait till a teenager's ears are kind of open before you slip something in there.
Yeah, and it might not be the moment where you're consciously slipping something in.
No, I mean, it's oftentimes you find that you have slipped something in when his ears were open and you didn't mean to because you didn't realize that he was actually listening.
That's the thing that leaves
and that's
an
the thing
impression.
that they take.
Yeah.
You know? I'm like, oh, that wasn't what I had meant for you to hear.
Yeah.
Or, you know, that of all the messages that I wanted to impart, you know,
Yeah.
you were listening at the time when I said the stupidest one, you know.
We were talking about the darkening political climate when we were talking. It was interesting to listen back to that at the end of 2015, I think it was. A memory that you had of your father was of him having to turn off the television, having to turn off the news because of it getting too much.
That was there in 1974 and 75 when I was like 6, 7, 8 years old. The Vietnam War, they broadcast it on TV every night, you know. And I don't remember much about it, but I remember he was very disturbed by it and couldn't watch it.
And that seems to have been one of these moments, perhaps, where you recall this was this person's response to this situation, and for whatever reason that has this impact. It's interesting, in the song Hobo, it's a song about an individual, it's a song about the individual who is singing the song, and yet within that first verse it does set up this family context, this individual in relation to the father and in relation to the son. What's the significance of beginning the record, Dog, with that, characterizing yourself in this way as a character who is asking others to pray for them, but also as a character within a broader family context?
Right. Well, the record is really generally more personal than anything that I've ever done, and deals with a lot of personal and troublesome things. You know, jumping right into it with both feet seemed like a good idea.
Yeah.
And to me, that's one of the more accessible songs on the record.
Yeah.
You know, it's definitely the most transparent. You know, it is exactly how I feel.
Yeah.
So,
How did he select Dog as the title track, that being the second track on the record, which we can hear now?
well, the record was called Dog first.
Before the song
Right,
existed.
right.
Okay.
It was going to be called Dog long before the song came.
When and how did you make the decision to call the record Dog?
I don't know that I did. Titles of records just seem to make themselves clear.
Yeah.
You know, and that I had this image in my mind that was going to be the title of the record. And
Yeah.
then, you know, I wrote the two Dog songs, Dog and Another Dog, you know, almost right after one another. Well, this makes perfect sense. You know, that I should write some more songs and call it like The Third Dog or some other different dog, or, you know, but that seemed ridiculous.
I would have enjoyed those songs too. Long before then, you wrote the story, You Look Like Your Dog.
Story, that was just a mean woman. Well, I was trying to cross the street with my dog, and she made fun of me out her window that I looked like my dog.
But this
and
was
laughed out the window of her Cadillac and rolled up her electric window and drove off.
And you've reflected also on a moment in your life when you would think less of taking the dog Reuben for a walk and more of Reuben kind of taking you for a walk.
Oh, yeah.
So it seems like thinking about things through actual relationships with particular dogs and through the metaphor of a dog has been something that's been happening for quite some time.
Yeah. Well, there's always been a dog around in my life, you know. My family's always, you know, there's always been a dog. And, you know, and I've always had good relationships with dogs. You know, the dog that I have right now, Reuben, is just is just very dear. And, you know, we just walk around, and she walks where she wants to walk, and I follow her to make sure that she doesn't walk in front of cars. And she sniffs and poops or does, you know, dog things, and I appreciate that, you know.
that manner of relationship with a dog seems quite different from the one described in the song Another Dog. Like Ruben's relationship with you seems quite different from Ranger's relationship with Gary.
Yeah, it's probably a bit of different. But, Another Dog was inspired by an actual dog who, had, I don't know, there's like an electric collar involved or some kind of chip involved. And, it just occurred to me that dog probably didn't feel like part of a family.
No.
If someone, put an electric collar on me and, it would not feel like a welcoming its own.
It's telling that you immediately jumped to the thought experiment of how would you feel if an electric collar were put on you? Because I feel like two related but quite distinct things are going on with regards to dogs in the record. On the one hand, relating one's predicament to that of a dog. In the song Dog, I've been forced down ever since I was just small, and one can imagine being like a particular dog. But then, on the other hand, there are these reflections on the manner in which humans relate to dogs, and what does that reveal about humans or the particular human. How do those two things relate, do you think? On the one hand, the thinking of oneself as like a particular dog. On the other hand, the evaluating humans on the basis of how they relate to dogs.
I'm not really sure that I know. I've always, this is probably a great defect in my personality, is I've been able to imbue personalities on inanimate objects all my life. Feel bad about toys that are left in the rain, because I wonder how that must feel to be left outside, when you thought you were someone's toy.
Yeah, this doesn't sound like a defect in one's personality.
Well, it's a horrible defect because it gives you this, it's just like it has no ending. It's like this bottomless pit of, oh my God, this is terrible. It's just like everything impacts you.
So there's a George Eliot quote from Middlemarch. If we could empathize and we could hear each other's heartbeats, metaphorically, then it would be deafening, and it would be impossible to live. If one reads like George Eliot's novels, there's the idea of hopefully one might be cultivating empathy for characters that might otherwise be dismissed as unlikable characters. But on the other hand, this can go too far.
Well, I think a certain amount of that is kind of important for all songwriting and interpreting of older songs as well.
Yes.
Because
to make that shoe fit, you need to be able to have.
If you can't at least get close to, what that must be like. I don't understand what it's like to be a Tonka truck left outside overnight. That doesn't. But I can ask the question. But what I'm understanding in my head is what it would be like for me to be a Tonka truck outside. I'm not understanding what it must be like for that Tonka truck. I can't. We don't have that kind of, experience. You have to kind of embrace agnosticism in a very big way because you only have this to go by. You can't get into anybody else's mind to really feel what it actually is like to be my neighbor or my dog or my shoes. So a little bit of agnosticism and embracing the idea that I just don't know is important.
So there is that agnosticism and that sense of uncertainty and an awareness of not being able to fully empathize with anyone who's in a different position.
It's not possible.
But then on the other hand, you are taking on the perspective of the dog and asserting on the part of the dog that a soul is a soul is a soul, and how can someone look at me and say that I don't have a soul? So the taco truck doesn't have a soul. It's less likely that the taco truck has a soul.
It's less likely.
But you can say with confidence, and a large part of this song is asserting that the dog does.
I'm not really sure how it came around to that part. For me, songwriting, starts as stories, rough draft, a story. There's a dog. This dog is outside or is inside, or whatever happens to a dog. A lot of these things come when you're walking the dog and you're thinking about these things. These stories kind of percolate in your head. The ones that won't leave you alone are the ones that kind of turn into songs. And the process is much more kind of visceral and intuitive than it is, rule driven. It's chaotic. It's not organized.
Thinking about intuition and knowledge and epistemology, it strikes me as interesting that the song begins, "How do you know? How do you know that I don't have a soul?" So maybe that's more crucial than the confident assertion, a soul is a soul is a soul. It actually begins on this note of uncertainty.
Well, that's because I studied philosophy.
Yes, yeah.
Because there is no assertion. There can't be.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you make an assertion, that's the question you'll get. Back it up.
How do you know?
How do you know? I mean, I've got an intuition about my dog Reuben participating in some kind of soul, as much as I have an intuition about me participating in some kind of soul. And it might be of any kind of given number of scenarios, but it's an interesting thing to think about. But when I come down to the idea of evidence, I don't have any.
So you finished your BA in philosophy.
Barely. It took me 8 years.
What are some ways in which philosophy has helped you as a person, has affected you as a songwriter? How does the enjoyment of philosophizing relate to the enjoyment of songwriting or performing? Are these things related?
It relates a lot.
Yeah. How?
Philosophy taught me to slow down.
Yeah.
And to understand my limitations. And to not only understand that I have limitations, but in a way to kind of revel in them. And once you kind of give up on this idea that you have to provide answers to anything, it's liberating. And then you can go and do a lot of things that you maybe couldn't do when you had it in your mind that you had to come up with some kind of answer. At the end of the day, what I came up with was that I am always kind of in progress, and that's what I like about my life the best. That it's always kind of this incremental journey, and I got that from philosophy.
Yeah.
I got a sense of patience from philosophy. And when I started writing songs, I think that, it allowed me to work on creating, lyrics and soundscapes that were basically open-ended and not quite finished, or that had, untidy ends.
Yeah.
Like Another Dog, for example, with Gary and Ranger. The ending is intended to be a soundscape of a dog running away and getting hit by a car.
What is the instrumentation there at the end?
Oh, it's a cacophony, isn't it? It's my resonator guitar tuned to a really weird drone chord.
Yeah.
It's called double C. My friend Mikkel playing any variety of drums and pieces of metal with sticks. Liz Draper playing a bass through a fuzz box. Jeff Mitchell playing electric guitar through I don't know what, a whole array of effects box. And Brother Dave playing a jaw harp.
Yeah.
A close mic jaw harp, which is the last thing you hear.
Were they aware that the sound was the sound of
No idea. I just
Ranger being hit by a car?
No, it was just I said I'd play the song. When I get done singing the words, you guys start playing, and we'll play until this thing kind of has some kind of natural. And I when you get into improvisational experiences without any kind of guidelines, especially with people who aren't prepared to improvise, that it will eventually come apart and sound like a train wreck.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what it did.
Yeah. Train wreck or a car
crash.
Yeah.
In my experience, the creative drive, the is an existential drive. There's no, kind of neat ending to it, where I don't set out to do something and then do it. That never happens. I've learned to be excited about that idea of becoming and filling in those blanks or filling in your slate, whatever you like. It's the part that I'm the most excited about, the messiest part. And the part that I've frankly relied on the most to help me through some of the hardest parts of my life.
How has songwriting helped you through some of the hardest parts of your life?
I don't think songwriting has.
Okay.
But that attitude.
But that attitude as to what becoming is.
In any creative endeavor. I
Yeah.
mean, because there's songwriting, which, like I said, for me is chaotic and, messy. And there's everything else, which in my life turns out to be chaotic and messy too, because as soon as I learn the rules, I disregard them because I'm not built that way, and then go about trying to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Which was something I got from my dad, who taught himself how to read when he was 55. So prior to that, if you gave him something that needed to be assembled, the first thing he would do is take the instructions out, ball them up, and throw them away because he couldn't read them. I didn't really know that. It wasn't something he shared with anybody. I didn't realize when I was a kid, we'd go to a store and he would take out a checkbook and slide the checkbook over to me. Even though I just learned how to write myself, and I'd fill in the check, and he would sign his name, which he could do. Didn't
realize
register that
why,
he didn't know how to do.
That was just what happened.
It's just
the
what always
routine.
happened.
Yes, but
fill this in. All things, fill this in. He could sign his name, that's what he could do. So you get something that needed to be assembled.
Yes.
And the directions would be thrown away first.
Yeah.
And then the process of trying to assemble this thing would then commence, which I always thought was a gas because it was the weirdest, kind of twistiest. You'd end up with the thing at the end, but how many times you had to take it apart to reassemble it again? Wait a second, we forgot that. That has to go in here. And I think it could have been much easier if we would have read the instructions, but it wouldn't have been so satisfying. Now, in my life, I'll almost deliberately do that. And that seems to be part of my personality disorder, that I prefer sometimes to just do it that way. It drives other people in my life a little bit crazy because I'm finding more than the assembled product. There's a certain atmosphere and meaning that I'm after that I find that I get from doing this in this shambolic way.
Yeah. There is the lyric in Hobo about being born to follow the steps my father trod. You're following in the steps. It seems like in maybe at least 3 different ways in the conversation. So setting the rules aside, engaging in the process in the manner that you're describing, but then also the patient reverence as well, which is interestingly at odds with the idea of setting rules aside. It's interesting that the record begins with this idea of trying to have insight about what's of value and wanting to pass those insights or those habits on in a conscious manner. That seems to be a recurring theme in the conversation and is right at the very beginning of the record as well.
Right.
How does that relate to what we've been talking about, to the process?
I think it relates a lot.
Yeah.
It's not, but it's not specific. It's an atmosphere, And the thing that I've gained out of all this is a sense of satisfaction and acceptance of just how messy this all is. You know, I don't have the answers, and I'm satisfied with that.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to have them, and I'm never going to have them, and I'm that's liberating.
Yeah. Speaking of finishing, we're wrapping up the first half of our conversation, and we're about to return to the Minnehaha Recording Company, where you'll be performing your original song, Jaybird.
Mm-hmm.
In this song, there's just a few lyrics at the very end, and those lyrics are, "If I was a jaybird with my pack upon my back, I'd fly from this town, I never would look back." So there's an affinity between this jaybird and ranger, I feel. It's this yearning and desire to escape.
In a way, it's kind of my nod to Henry Flint. He put out a record called Back Porch Hillbilly Blues, Volume 1.
Mm-hmm.
There's a track on there that is, he establishes a soundscape or an atmosphere that is absolutely the most mesmerizing and trance-like thing. That whole record is like that for me. I mean, the first time I heard that record, it was driving in a car in Ireland with my friend Pete, and we put the record in and listened to it all the way through, and then played it again, and then played it again, and then played it over and over and over again for the rest of the 3 or 4 days that we were driving together. And never said anything about it. It would come to the end and we'd play it again.
Because that was your landscape, your kind of sonic landscape,
Yeah.
that was fitting for whatever reason.
Yeah. And I've never gotten tired of that record.
Yeah. Without there being any vocals, it's establishing a certain landscape. And then just at the end, there is a human voice. We're not speaking as a jaybird. It's if I were a jaybird. It's like the experiment, if I were the taco track. What's the relationship between that thought experiment, which is also an expression of yearning, and the sonic landscape?
Well, because I mean, the closest that I personally am going to get to leaving myself behind is through music, you know, and through specifically non-lyrical music. You know,
A special type of transcendence comes through non-lyrical music, do you think?
completely. I find that I can transcend a lot through, you know, creating these kind of soundscapes.
Yeah. It's interesting then that the closest thing to transcendence that you experience, and it is close, or it is that, is then followed by this, if I were able to transcend, then...
You know, you're doomed to fail every single time. You're not going anywhere, you know. You play your guitar all day, you know, at the end of it, you know, you'll put it down.
Yeah.
And you're where you were when you picked it up. In a way, you haven't really done anything, you know, and it's different every time you do it. And it's briefly transcendental, and then it's not anymore.
Yeah. Well, let's put our words and our thoughts down and enable the Jaybird to exist. Then nothing will have happened and we will be back here in the duplex. So this is Jaybird, performed by Charlie PARR at the Minnehaha Recording Company.
I was a jaybird with my pack upon my back. I was a jaybird with my pack upon my back. I'd fly from this town, I never would come back.